Welcome to the MasterDrive November edition of Drive Chat. We have the opportunity of talking to Tafi today, Tafi Mazikana, who is a rather interesting character because he's got some information to share with us on something that assists companies who are dealing with staff issues with regard to mental health, and how what he can offer provides a stigma-free means of being able to access mental health at a really affordable level. So we'd like to welcome him on board, and we're going to ask him some questions. So Tafi, please join us.
Hello, Eugene.
Hi, Tafi. Listen, I do trust that the viewers that will see this, it's going to be shared amongst all our database. So we trust that something good will come out of this for you. That's not the primary intention. But I do think that if we can just share what we have been exposed to as a company and the benefits that we've derived, and certainly how we've made it available on a public platform, maybe there's others out there that will benefit from it as well. So maybe just talk to yourself for a moment. Your background is finance. So how do you take that giant leap from finance into dealing with issues of mental health?
Thanks so much, Eugene. So I was living in the UK, and I was very lucky that in 2019, whilst working in finance, I stumbled across a link that said, hey, you can actually self-refer yourself for this area of mental health. So I, having grown up here in Africa, just had none of the context around what this topic is, what it means, and what does seeking help actually mean. So very lucky that I was in this, I think, well-resourced environment where I was given that option. And, you know, I was called back. Would you like face-to-face therapy? Would you like group therapy? Or do you want to try this self-guided digital option that we're having really good results on? So I, with all my stigmas, was not ready to talk to an individual. So I tried the self-guided option, fully expecting that it will not work, but at least I've ticked this box. And I was quite surprised how effective it was. And I was actually at that time treated for severe anxiety and depression. My quality of life went through the roof. And of course, that made me an advocate for other people to seek out this similar type of help, and eventually to found Vimbo with a view towards making such similar effective things available for us here in Africa. And that's together with our chief science officer, who's on the psychological side.
Tafi, just take a moment and talk us through some of the stigmas that's attached. You're a man, both men here, but what is the stigma that's attached to men seeking mental health? And in particular, you mentioned to me in a discussion, African men.
Yeah, I think definitely mental health has been missold to us because the idea of seeking help is essentially equal to weakness, is what we've been told. And that's very far from the truth. So, for example, in our platform, we leverage cognitive behavioral therapy, which is actually very much centered around empowerment. You know your difficulties better than anyone else if you have difficulties. And we're giving you the tools to be able to tackle those and to solve those for yourself. So an example is the idea of behavior activation, which is one of the modules and the things that we teach in our platform, which is that idea that the easiest way to change a thought is to actually start with action. So the idea of follow the plan, not the mood. So if I said I'm going to go for a jog on Monday, I should, despite how I feel on Monday, go for a jog. I don't have to outrun the fastest runner in the world. I can go for a slow jog. But over time, by doing that, the plan becomes the mood. So that's that behavior change. So this is actually empowering. So it's that idea that help is weakening, but actually it makes you more of a man because you are, I think, more empowered to change your life and solve things for yourself. So I think that's been the biggest mis-selling, unfortunately.
Talk to me, please, because you gave a figure at a presentation that you shared with us in the public platform, Driving the Influence, and I know it was about dealing with mental health issues surrounding addiction to alcohol. Some of the statistics with regard to men and suicides, please share.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And unfortunately, in South Africa, the majority, over 70% of suicides are committed by men. And these are the people who are least likely to talk. So when we look at who reaches out for help, for example, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, they're huge in South Africa. They take over 3,000 calls a day to their mental health crisis lines. And they find that only 24% of the people who reach out to them are men. So it's that idea that the minority of people talking and reaching out are the majority of those who actually, unfortunately, dominate the suicide statistic, which, if someone thinks mental health is not real, suicide, I believe, is that final, unfortunate statistic.
Okay, so that's kind of set the scene for it. So if you had to look at South Africa in general, let's not discriminate between men and women. What is the current mental state, do you think? Do people understand the issue? Is this something that we can help people to deal with? Give us your comments about South Africa in general.
Yeah. So when we started this journey, we actually conceptualized it before the pandemic. And we were saying that there is a mental health pandemic. And of course, what happened in 2020 for a lot of people was very traumatic. And for a lot of us, we lost behaviors that we have. So there was a study done by the University of Johannesburg and the Human Sciences Research Council, which found a 36% prevalence of depression during that period of 2020, which is quite high. It's over a third of people. And unfortunately, in South Africa, with our resources, with where we are in our journey, 92% of people currently with a difficulty are thought to not be in any form of help. So the unfortunate truth is that for most people, they will never encounter, so 92% of people, they will never encounter through their lives any form of help. And they'll never experience, I believe, a more enriched life that's available to them, just because they will never actually even encounter this topic.
It's actually quite depressing. Unfortunately, I really don't want to take the subject there. But yeah, the fact that we've got challenges with unemployment in our country phenomenally high, that affects income. And what is your view? And I know this wasn't a question that was posed for you, but affordability, how big a role does that play in seeking help with dealing with mental issues?
It's a huge hurdle because, unfortunately, with mental health, there's also that education gap around the topic. So it's the idea of, how do I pay for something that I don't know I have? So firstly, what is it? That's where we need the ecosystem to play a role in enabling people with that initial information just around what is it, and therefore why is it worth tackling it, whether that resource you put in is time or whether that resource you put in is money. Unfortunately, on the topic of money, most of the things that are available in South Africa are very expensive. So most people cannot just afford those. So for example, a psychologist could be 950 rands per hour. So firstly, how many people can afford that? And then secondly, those who can afford will be saying, what am I paying for? Because I don't actually, to begin with, understand the topic. So it's about, how do we make the first step smaller? And that's what our platform tries to do, essentially.
Okay. So now I know how we got engaged with you, that was as a company. Do you think, and if so, what can be done? Do you think that it's companies have a responsibility to create this awareness that you're talking about? If that's the case, how so? How do they go about doing it? And have you had any success so far in creating this through that platform?
Yeah, absolutely. I think companies are in a unique position to be able to interact with people and help people. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence that for companies, tackling this topic of mental health is actually beneficial as well. So the return on investment from helping people early is found. There was a Deloitte study in 2020 that found you can get up to a 500% return on investment as a company. And that's across the topic of presenteeism, people working whilst having a difficulty. That's the biggest one. Absenteeism, so people being off, but really it's just the mental health difficulty that is causing them to be off, even though it might be presented as something else. And then lastly, people leaving because they unfortunately associate their difficulties with being in the wrong job and saying, actually, this job is what's causing me to have difficulty, but actually there's an underlying mental health difficulty that could have potentially been easily resolved. So there's a lot of benefit for companies to actually act. And we've had great success actually through how we do this rollout. So what we do to our companies, we say, hey, you can offer this to your employees as an anonymous survey. We take advantage of that 5 minutes of curiosity for someone to say, hey, this is anonymous. This is now made available to me. This is the voucher code for me to enter. Let me give it 5 minutes of my time. And we find that generally 70% of people who start that 5-minute journey actually then stay with us and interact with the platform and get a learning. So that's how we approach it. And we found in our company rollouts, sometimes over 56% of people with actually clinical levels of depression have recovered in some of those. So it's really provable impact, as well as, 5 minutes. Let's just take 5 minutes of their time and then have a lasting, lifelong impact.
Yeah, so as psychologists, you try and break it down. It's going to be rather expensive. Just to talk us through what one could expect once they've got that 5 minutes, and let's say they've been hooked. What can they expect? What's the duration? And just talk us through that journey that person experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So it starts with just giving a basic understanding of what our platform is and isn't. It is a self-guided app. And what we're doing is we're offering you a specific course, which is going to be helpful just based on what we're feeling like you're potentially where you are. So we do start with some questions that give you an idea of what's common when someone is or is dealing with difficulty. But also, if it seems through those questions that you're doing pretty well, we'll say, hey, it seems like you're doing really well right now. And at the end of all of that, we're giving to a course which has a package of skills. So if you are in difficulty, these skills will help you to tackle those difficulties and come out of that. And firstly, destigmatize the idea of difficulty. And then secondly, if you are doing really well, these are skills that are going to build your resilience. Is that idea of your mind is your most important weapon. And if that's the case, when do you sharpen your sword? Before the battle or during the battle? So quite obviously, that resilience building is what we also have really great feedback on, and people getting prepared for, if there is a difficulty, I'm going to get back to being myself probably more quickly than before. And also, I'm more likely to reach out for help if I feel like I can no longer do it by myself,
Timeline, how long typically will it last?
7 to 12 weeks is generally how long our courses within the platform are. So learn a skill, practice it in your real life. And it's very practice focused. So we're not keeping you staring at a screen. It's kind of, here's a skill, go out and try it. How did it go? Is how our platform works.
Last question to you, Tafi.
Yeah.
You're a leader in your company. You no doubt have engaged with other leaders. How can they have an impact on creating this change? And what type of leadership is needed in order for something like this to happen within organizations?
Fantastic question. And it really comes down to that ability to have empathy. For leaders who have, I think, experienced the topic of mental health, even either firsthand or through a loved one or someone who they know, that empathy might be something that they can pull on to understand that, look, this is something which will be beneficial to help our colleagues with. But then we also have to be conscious. The World Health Organization had a really interesting stat. This is pre-COVID, where they said 1 in 4 people through their lifetime will experience a mental health difficulty. And I think we sometimes do not consider the 3 and 4 who might not encounter difficulty, but end up in positions of leadership where they have to have the empathy for colleagues. So, for example, in our platform, if someone does that resilience training, it will help them, yes, in the future, but also give them awareness of how other people interpret situations and might have certain difficulties and thinking errors, etc. So those leaders are then able to, I think, have more empathy just by engaging with the topic. So it's that idea of, if I'm a leader, I think there is a responsibility to engage in a topic, even just from a point of view of understanding, so that I can have the empathy to know that, okay, this colleague is not a performance issue, or is it that they just need some help on the mental health side? And what's the value, to understand the value of making help available.
Tafi, thank you very much for that insightful discussion. Your take-home message in 15 seconds or 30 seconds, what's your take-home message for the viewers who will be looking at this?
I think the main message is everyone can help, and is the first small step is the most important thing. If we can make the steps smaller, we can get more people the help that they need.
Tafi, thank you very much. The company is Vimbo Health, and through personal experience in our company, we won't tell you how many have participated, but certainly the take-up has been phenomenal. And once they looked into it and it was explained, they began to appreciate what we were trying to do. Tafi, thank you very much. I'm wishing you all the success. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.